I'm just thinking there's so much trust in the experts. And, every time there's a crisis, people turn to the experts and they make, I'll put this prediction back up again, They make these predictions like only 11 years left. And there were similar predictions given during COVID, which forced governments to act irrationally because people are in a state of panic. And I think that, people should be comfortable questioning the experts to say, actually, how do you know? Because, for me, the fact that the Bible says there will be pestilences, natural disasters, so there'll be earthquakes, famines, there'll be diseases like COVID. And it says, look, see that you be not troubled. That means there are going to be more and more coming, but don't panic. Don't put in measures like lockdowns like we did, because all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Like, that's a very practical approach, not just for humans down on the ground, but even for governments to say, look, in your policies.
Rather than, say, for example, spending money on some committees, some United Nations committees overseas for climate change developments, like, can we not use that money to clean our rivers, or to help people who are really in need, And so
in Africa, getting clean water, access to resources, totally build roads for them.
Build roads, allow them to tap into their resources as well, whilst at the same time preserving their habitats, and doing it in a way that's good for them, and allowing them to do that, because it's easy when you're at the top of the castle after you've used all the resources and everything that
taking
you can.
Everybody else's resources.
Now you're at the top, and now it's like, look at me, my paper straw, It's like, see, we're doing something, guys, while everyone else is down there, and it's like
trying to build up.
Yeah. So when you reach a point of development, then people can care about. It's easier for people to then talk about those things. But when you're just living off of the food of the day,
you're trying to just find bread to survive. It's like, I can't control the earthquake. I need food today. My children are hungry right now.
Yes, everyone should look up those who are living in less than $1 a day.
All right. Well, we've been trekking through a few topics, but I think today's topic, climate change, is a big topic. It's globally relevant, and I think it's in the words of many world leaders, the biggest issue facing civilization. And so I wanted to start with a little article I have here on. It's actually taken from the United Nations website, and it says, only 11 years left to prevent irreversible damage from climate change, speakers warned during General Assembly high-level meeting. So only 11 years left. Now, this was in 2019. This is 4 years left, so 7 years to go before climate catastrophe. But maybe the question to begin with is, what is climate change? What is climate change?
I guess the word hints at what it is, right? Climate change, the weather changing.
Yes.
Right? Which entails an increase in natural disasters.
Yeah.
An increase in seasonal disparities. I guess when we look at the world today, we see that there were fires in Hawaii and even in Australia that impacted New Zealand too. All the skies turned orange.
Yeah.
So these things would entail
climate change. Yeah.
But specifically man's connection to it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Too. That
so
man
really
is responsible for, at some level, the climate change.
Yeah. So what's being experienced is an increase in the level of natural disasters since, I suppose, past years. And I know, it's a big contentious one where some people don't believe. But I think in my short lifespan, I can agree that, since I was young, I never heard of tsunamis. I actually didn't, never heard of one. And as time has gone on, I've heard of earthquakes, experienced them. I've heard of floods, experienced them, tsunamis, volcanoes, droughts. And I think that it's become common. Everybody kind of understands the narrative because we've experienced it to some degree or the other,
When the water crisis happened, I guess there were restrictions on the water in New Zealand when there was a drought. And perhaps it's reflected on increase of food prices also, because farmers and those in industry have to accommodate for climate change, or maybe there's seasonal issues, and so the prices will inevitably go up. I did see the sky turn orange from the fires in
In
Australia.
Aussie, yeah.
I was thinking, whoa,
Yeah.
you know, like how, like they must be massive
That was buzzy, yeah.
to go across the Tasman Gulf and
Yeah,
to impact New Zealand.
totally.
You know, so yeah, I've seen that aspect of it. You know.
Yeah, so I'm no expert, but I definitely can't contend the reality that natural disasters have increased. Like some people would say, oh, maybe we're just recording it more nowadays. But I've got a passion fruit vine. I've got 2 passion fruit vines outside, and for the last couple of seasons, my passion fruit vines are like flourishing in winter. Like it didn't die off. Passion fruit dies off in winter, completely dry, dead, and then springs back up in spring. It completely flourished, thrived, covered the whole trellis I had built for it all through winter. And that's certainly not normal,
Yeah.
So I can't contest that reality.
I mean, it's an even bigger reality for farmers, right? If your tree in your backyard, was an issue. Like imagine the farmers who are producing massive crops, all these seasonal disparities. I remember the cranberry orchards in New Zealand got hit really bad by like a frost that had come over, and all of that was affected in a very negative way. And so there is climate issues.
I have no contention with the narrative that there's an increase in natural disasters. That is perplexing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now the question remains: to what lengths will you go? When the point was raised that we have 11 years left till climate catastrophe, irreversible climate damage. When you say that you have 11 years left, to what lengths does that entail you have to go? Because we're facing like a almost irreversible damage, almost like an apocalypse of sorts.
Yes.
And so because that's the narrative, that we're facing a kind of an apocalyptic vision of the future, what lengths do people go? Because what can end up happening is the ends can justify the means, and the ends in this case is irreversible climate catastrophe. So the pressure then on governments and stuff is, you had climate emergencies at one point, but
we've got to implement drastic measures, otherwise we all die.
Yeah, that's the thing. And to what lengths, will you go now? Because that's the overarching narrative that everything falls under. The economy, if we're truly facing this ecological catastrophe, then the economy needs to be regulated. The farms need to be regulated. People movement needs to be regulated because the threat is
imminent.
An imminent ecological catastrophe.
Yeah.
And so that means that the world has gone more drastic in its approach, or will have to get more drastic in its approach.
I suppose in some ways, when you look at what happened with COVID, the narrative was, thousands of people could die. So let's shut down borders, shut down economies, shut down buying and selling, because lives are more important than money. That's the narrative, right? And so the response was very drastic in terms of shutting down. People had no access to, a lot of their luxuries because they were closed. Because in the effort to save lives. So if climate change, we are in a climate emergency, it's kind of the same train of thought that, well, we would rather sacrifice prosperity for survival.
Yes. And that would mean that some people would have to suffer too.
Yes.
As a result of this, that farmers may have to suffer.
Yeah.
To reverse the catastrophe, or some businesses would have to
That's
suffer,
right.
Or some nations would have to go without tapping into their resources, because that will
We've got to save lives.
Yeah.
Now it's an interesting connection, isn't it? Then, because I'm no expert with climate change, but I can just see the pattern with how COVID was dealt with. What were the ripple effects of COVID lockdowns globally?
Wow.
And what's the aftermath of that, in terms of people's livelihood?
Governments were willing to sacrifice the economy. So the economy goes down the dumps, in order to save people from this existential crisis. People's freedoms were restricted too, as a result of that. That people, there were mandates, or you had to wear masks in certain areas. Cities were quarantined off. You couldn't. There was restrictions on movement between cities. You know, and so also people had to have COVID passports and stuff too. So they went to
the extra lengths.
For this, and because of the crisis, it was deemed that the cost was worth it to the economy. You know, that we would go, that there'd be areas, as you were talking about, where there'd be massive layoffs and massive hardships there. You know, but that was seen as justified.
Yeah,
you know, because of the nature of the crisis, which was COVID. You know? Yeah. And yet the climate crisis is seen as much worse, much bigger than even the COVID crisis. You know, that you have massive councils of the world coming together to address the issue.
And watching the doomsday clock that it's now at 11:55. You know, until doom.
Yes, and so to what links would people go? Even economically now. Let's talk economically.
Yes.
For the climate.
So let's shift then that model of what we saw with COVID, that when people are in a panic, when they're in a panic and they declare national emergency with COVID, they put in drastic measures that impacted economies all across the globe, and then they backtrack like, actually, maybe we're overreacting, and actually people are probably better off dealing with COVID and its symptoms than dealing with the economic repercussions of lockdowns and all of that.
And the people cost too, right?
And the people cost,
it wasn't people cost. It wasn't just the economy. It was people were impacted also.
Yes.
Because of that economic relationship between people and the economy.
Yeah.
You know? It's telling that any means can be used to, and any method used to fight the ecological crisis, especially with the 11 years left predictions that get thrown out.
We can agree that humans are impacting the environment. Pollution, no question. You know, I've got some images here, actually, that I can just scroll through, just showing, you know, just the level of pollution, just some of it is quite sad, actually. You know, pictures of kids and just rubble and rubbish. You know, I think that anyone who's spent time in nature and experienced its beauty can appreciate the sadness of a ruined natural habitat for an animal, you know, to think, wow, you know, people were appreciating cleaner air, they said, you know, because of the COVID lockdowns, cleaner water, you know, the narrative of plastics in the ocean and you know, deforestation. I think that there's relevance to that narrative that humans are pillaging the earth, destroying natural habitats for animals.
And we have to look at also the luxuries of the West, you know, air conditioning.
Yeah.
Oh, air conditioning, you know, don't you love it, you know? And all, you know, takeouts, you know, and their impact on the planet. I mean, you know, that's, you know,
it's huge.
It's huge, you know, and you know, your Starbucks coffee, you know, or your computer that you have, you know, which was mined through how many different processes it took.
You
know?
went there.
Maybe it's some
poor iPhone,
some poor person in China working at a factory, you know, or in a sweatshop, you know, or in India, you know. So there's those things too, you know. And it's funny, as soon as you take a little bit of luxury away, people riot.
Yes. You know? This is a good point you're making.
Yeah.
Because if we're serious about this climate narrative, which is predominantly spoken of in the West, then we must listen to these logical implications.
Yes, I mean, we can't say the developing world only has a responsibility to not tap into their resources, but we, having tapped into our resources and theirs, have all these luxuries, you know, but we want to have our cake and eat it too, sort of thing, you know. Is it the environment that's more important, or is it our luxuries, you know? And that would mean that, you know, your Starbucks and your computers and your air conditioning and which all come from resources of other countries, you know, and stuff, you know, and the load would be on the poor of other countries.
Yes.
You know, at the end of the day, you know?
Yes.
Yeah,
and we're importing stuff from China? Like how much stuff, I don't mean to go there, but how much stuff is made in China? And they say China is one of the biggest producers of greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
But all the countries saying that are constantly importing the stuff from China. So the demand is being met by China. And yet we're complaining. It's like, why don't you stop ordering the stuff if you really believe in your climate idea?
Exactly. Yet that's not what's happening.
That's not what's happening. It's just talk.
Yeah. You'd have to give up comfort, a lot of comfort, But as soon as you lift your finger against the comforts of the West, even just a small economic downturn, or whatever it is, suddenly it's like, no, we're in a crisis, and, so, there's that, I guess you would call it, selfishness of people, or of man, to acquire, to live in luxury, but at the same time know that in order to address the crisis, he might have to give that up, and give that up in a very real way, But what's happened is the emphasis has been put on other countries to, not tap into their resources anymore, So what is the West willing to pay now? Because they're the ones who are
championing
the cause of the environment.
Yeah.
It's funny. Oh, can I?
Yeah.
Starbucks had a way of selling their products. They were like, our products are a little bit expensive, and here in the West, here in America, because we have accommodated for environmental concerns. So a lot of people felt like they didn't have to do anything; they just buy their stuff at a little bit more expensive price, and
they're donating to the cause.
They're donating to the cause, And that seems like a big cop-out to me, you know?
Just to quench your conscience.
Yeah, to quench your conscience. And the industry makes money, and the industry is still, they need those coffee beans, But you pay a little bit just to appease your conscience, which is nowhere near the lengths you need to go when you talk about 11 years left ecological catastrophe.
Yes.
So at the very least, there are some people who try to be consistent, with that life, And then you have, billionaires on these private jets, that go to these meetings around the world, and then they say, climate change, And so, there is that hypocrisy too that exists in the world.
So I really think the point you brought out about, the way the West lives, and the kind of talk that they have, like we have New Zealand politicians debating climate change policy, but they all drive cars.
Yeah.
And, the thought that, okay, I'm going to get an electric car, but, the resources to make an electric car, like, where are those coming from, And just because they don't impact one particular element there, but what about the factory that molded the... the car, like all of that.
Lithium from Afghanistan.
Honestly, like all of that is not being taken into account. It just looks good on paper. Yeah. And, the thousands of dollars. Like, imagine talking to someone in Zimbabwe that, look, you need to buy an electric car. Like, bro, I can't even get a bicycle.
Yeah.
And we're kind of trying to bring in measures about that.
Is it kind of...
Now you go.
Right. Is it kind of like a moral superiority to it? I don't use plastic straws. I use paper straws. So you there in the other developing countries stop the pollution sort of thing.
Yeah.
Even though that thing doesn't change the winds of time. So as to speak. Reverse the ecological march into
that's right
to where it is.
Yeah.
But yet there's that emphasis.
Yeah. So obviously for me, from a practical perspective, I'm a Christian, and I realize that man cannot control the weather. Man is trying to play God when it comes to the issue of climate, and particularly because I look back 2,000 years ago, Jesus made a prediction in the book of Matthew and the book of Luke, and the one in Luke in particular says, there would be natural disasters. There'll be signs in the heavens and on the earth. And then it says, the sea and the waves roaring. And then it says, there'll be distress of nations with perplexity, men's hearts failing them from fear, looking at the things that are coming upon the earth. And I think to myself, like, what did he know that people don't know today? Because how did he foresee that we would be living in a time when every nation would be distressed with perplexity over the natural disasters that are happening upon the world, and they would be trying to work it out, but they won't have a solution, So if I was a politician and I had some openness to the inspiration given by Jesus, it would be like, oh, wow, see that you be not troubled, because you can't fix the weather. So therefore, I would save all the billions of dollars that are being committed to climate research or trying to impact climate change, because actually we can't fix it.
Yeah, and rather focus on what we directly impact,
can fix, exactly.
Like sewage, pollution,
yes,
plastic in the oceans.
Yes, we can make a difference
it's very easy
for pollution.
Yeah,
yes.
pollution. Yeah. Rather than the sort of thing you're talking about. Yeah, no, it's I had a note here. The world is more climate aware than ever, and is more climate regulated than ever. Yet the trend has been one of worsening crisis, and like you say, that there is a lot of distress. There is a problem. There's a lot of distress about it, and it's funny. I know it's hard to accept sometimes, but that's the thing. Like sometimes we do just have to accept things. There are things that we can control, that we do all we can to minimize them, but there are some things that we just have to accept as well, and that might be a hard thing.
Well, COVID, we've accepted it, now we're dealing with it, and we can't control it, and so life is going on, people are working, and they just have to deal with it as it's going.
Because China had a policy one time of 0 COVID cases before they, relinquished their lockdowns, So that was their goal, I don't know how they're doing now.
People were protesting. There was major protests because people were sick of lockdowns.
But we didn't reach, no country reached 0.
Absolutely, still not.
Still not, yet they decided that, okay, we lived in a hermit shell for long enough. Yeah. It's time to maybe move on and just accept that we do have to live with some levels of it. We can minimize it with vaccines, right. We can minimize it with the way you live, the way you eat, and there's certain things. But there was a level of acceptance as well that
it is what it is. It's going to be.
People are going to get sick, and we just have to. Yeah. Maybe keeping the economy on a stranglehold is not the best way to, in the long term. We can't live like that. Yeah. And so I think the same questions would arise even with. We are facing an ecological crisis in 11 years.
Yes. I'm just thinking there's so much trust in the experts. And, every time there's a crisis, people turn to the experts and they make, I'll put this prediction back up again, They make these predictions like only 11 years left. And there were similar predictions given during COVID, which forced governments to act irrationally because people are in a state of panic. And I think that, people should be comfortable questioning the experts to say, actually, how do you know? Because, for me, the fact that the Bible says there will be pestilences, natural disasters, so there'll be earthquakes, famines, there'll be diseases like COVID, and it says, look, see that you be not troubled. That means there are going to be more and more coming, but don't panic. Don't put in measures like lockdowns like we did, because all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Like, that's a very practical approach, not just for humans down on the ground, but even for governments to say, look, in your policies, the priority then, because I think of, what Jesus spoke of as when he comes back, what will be the standard of judgment. It says, I was hungry and you did not feed me. I was thirsty, you didn't give me drink. I was sick and you did not come and visit me. I was in prison and you didn't. So I'm thinking, okay, he's saying, look, you can't change the weather, but you can make a difference for your neighbor who's hungry. Because their immediate needs, like I don't lose sleep over climate change. Yes, there was a flood in Feb, but I don't lose sleep over it.
But your moral imperative is to help people who were impacted directly by the flood by acts of charity and being with the people.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So I can't make a difference with the weather. I can't change the weather. Yeah. But yes, we did rally around who can we make a difference for, who's out of a home, who can we supply food for, who can we give clothes to. And, that was the purpose of even our church putting a container together for Tonga, because it's like that's what we can actually practically change.
Doing what's within your power,
Definitely.
And there might be a lot of untapped potential there for a lot of people,
And all the thousands of dollars, billions of dollars funneled into uncertain climate predictions could be channeled to people's real needs that they're experiencing today.
Yeah. And it's interesting that that Christ gave the admonition that people's hearts would be failing them for fear, seeing these things that are coming upon the earth. And there is that element that people have even pushed to try and generate that fear, as well, to make certain, statements that...
to get people to respond.
To respond, But speaking from a down-to-earth level now, where me and you are, Christ gives the admonition. Feed the hungry. Go to the sick and minister to their needs, and help people that are suffering, and do what's in your power, Sufficient is... how does
sufficient for the day is the evil thereof. So today's trouble is enough for today.
Yes.
Let tomorrow worry about itself.
11 years left till the end of the world sort of thing. It's like, no. We have enough trouble today.
Absolutely.
Each country has a responsibility to better what's within its power. No prime minister is a government of the world. Was the elected prime minister of the world. It's his country, and they do the best they can. What's within their sphere of influence,
And each country only gets the amount of natural disasters they can handle. It's not like the same country gets them all the time.
That's what I'm touching on. There were 500 different. Say there's 500 different disasters, but we didn't get 500 disasters
in New Zealand.
But there's only so much that we can take in, and there's only so much evil that we can borrow. Rather than say, for example, spending money on some committees, some United Nations committees overseas for climate change developments. Like, can we not use that money to clean our rivers, or to help people who are really in need, And so
in Africa, getting clean water, access to resources, totally build roads for them.
Build roads, allow them to tap into their resources as well, whilst at the same time preserving their habitats, and doing it in a way that's good for them and allowing them to do that, because it's easy when you're at the top of the castle after you've used all the resources and everything that
taken
you can.
Everybody else's resources.
Now you're at the top, and now it's like, look at me, my paper straw. It's like, see, we're doing something, guys, while everyone else is down there, and it's like
trying to build up.
So when you reach a point of development, then people can care about. It's easier for people to then talk about those things. But when you're just living off of the food of the day,
you're trying to just find bread to survive. It's like, I can't control the earthquake. I need food today. My children are hungry right now.
Yes, everyone should look up those who are living in less than $1 a day.
Yes,
I don't know what the statistics are, but it's a huge thing.
Something like 2% of the world's population indulge in the world's wealth, and the rest are living on meager resources.
Absolutely. So there is that disparity too. Which is a very real thing, and charity is a very important thing, to addressing it and dealing with the problems that your country faces,
I really like the point you made, about sitting at the top of the castle, because, a lot of the West has plundered third world resources for developing countries. They've got rich off them, and now they've built their cities, built their roads, built their industries, and then those who have been plundered and are poor are now being regulated to say, actually, we need to stop doing that now because, we're affecting the environment. But it's like, okay, so why don't you give us back our resources so we don't have to dig anymore? Just give us the money, because they need to survive. They need the resources that made the West even have time to be thinking about the environment, because you think of generations before, no one, if there was an earthquake, no one was having global conferences of how we're going to deal with the environment. It was like, okay, how are we going to fix the problem and rebuild from where we've been destroyed? That's as far as it ever went in all the thousands of years that we can think back to. But now we're so rich and increased with goods, we have time to say, how are we going to change the weather now, because we've tackled everything. I was even thinking, like, people talk about depopulation, and normally you hear someone like Bill Gates, sorry to mention by name, but talking about depopulation, and I'm thinking, so who's going to be taken out first? Like, are you going to volunteer and say, hey, look, I'll check out today, I'm out? Because who are you recommending to exit first when you say that?
Exactly. Yep. And it's sad, but a lot of the time it will fall on the
poor one.
It's not. It's
Yes.
not Bill Gates.
It's
you
not
know?
Bill Gates getting
Let's just
out.
say, you know,
It's like the world needs me because I got heaps of money, but you're not contributing anything, so out with you. You know?
yeah. What happens is a few people can deal with the issue, and the rest are made to live with the consequences
That's
of it.
right.
You know,
That's right.
and suffer under
That's right.
under it. You know,
Yeah.
and so there is
Let's
that.
shut down Microsoft.
The world lives off of made in China. You know.
Yeah.
So, But so it's
These
there
are
is that level.
These
you
are
know?
relevant points. You know, I'm even thinking like people are investing in whether there's life on the moon. They've got billions of
exactly.
dollars to invest in whether there's life on the moon. Let's send
Life on
out and
Mars,
get
yeah.
some samples from Mars or from outer space. But my next door neighbor is dying of starvation. But I'm interested in what's on Mars. And, you know, like, where's the ethics in that? You know, where's the morality in that? So then we kind of have this false sense of compassion for, oh, we've got to save the planet. We have resources, but we're investing them in, like, you know, things that really have got nothing to do with our present existence, you know. And, like, what would it take to build a new civilization on Mars? You know?
Yeah.
All the Earth's resources.
Woe to you, rich men.
Woe to you, rich men. Yeah.
The Bible makes it very clear, you know, heaping for themselves treasure for the last days.
That's
you know?
right.
And it's interesting, and it equates it with last days. There is a existential crisis that people are worried about, that they want to accumulate wealth to preserve themselves, you know. And so, heaping up treasure, you know, being greedy, you know,
Yeah.
disregarding the plight of the poor, the cries of the poor, you know, and it is very real poor. Yes, there's relative poverty in the West, but no, there's people who really live tough in other
Nothing.
countries.
They
you
don't
know?
have social welfare.
Yeah,
You don't
yeah.
work. You don't eat.
You went to Zimbabwe one time, and you
I
saw
grew
people
up there.
Exactly.
I'm
But then
a
you came back. You went back,
Then I went back after I'd been here.
and you saw people who were really like,
really poor.
yeah, and even some of your family too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah,
And people are living off of $1 a day, you know, or even less than, you know, in
Yes.
many countries, you know.
totally.
So there is that disparity there that does exist, that the Bible warns about. You know, it's as though you go to, you know, the heights of heaven. You know, whether you're sending a rocket ship all the way up into space or you're going down to the earth to build a bunker. You know, it's like, you know, God is saying, no, you know, like the end comes for all people.
It will come for
you know,
all people.
It comes
That's
for all
right.
people. You can't escape it. You know that
Yeah.
there is an end point, and Judgment Day does come eventually. You
Yeah.
know, and there is a recompense that does occur where the Lord finally does hear the cries of the poor. You know,
These
There
are
is
very
that
valid points, you know. And I think
there was
you know,
Amos too, I think.
Yeah,
Amos.
the throwing away of the Bible means that now all we have are experts, you know, because it's kind of relegated to this superstitious realm, and we should be put with fairy tales. And yet, you know, how practical is the advice of Jesus in terms of materialism, in terms of greed? It's like if we do live within our means, then actually we will save a lot of excess pollution and all of that. If people just, it's like, why don't you live with what you need? And on the other side, if we think, okay, there is God, and he says, look, you can't control what's happening with the weather. You can only control how you're living, and you can make a difference for your neighbor. Things would change. Like the outcome would be realized, but people aren't willing to go there.
Yeah, because the solutions to climate change doesn't necessarily rest on said individuals, but some say the business economy as a whole. You know, but it's like individuals can't control the weather, but somehow the whole system is responsible for it. You know, but God is saying, you know, like, what are you willing to give up?
Yes.
You know, if you really believe these things.
Yeah.
You know? And it might mean giving up on certain luxuries.
Totally.
You know? And it might mean not living above your means. You know, and it does mean, you know, being content with a simpler life.
Absolutely.
You know?
I mean, this is precisely,
you know, and a simpler way of doing things.
Yeah.
You know, and a giving to charity. You know,
Yeah.
and making a difference in that way. You know.
that's the example of Jesus, right?
yeah.
That's the life that he
It
lived,
is, yeah.
of simplicity and making a difference for humanity. And, you know, the impact has rippled on generations, you know. And I think to myself, you know, people want humanity to change. But how will people change? You know, how will people begin to care about the world? How will they begin to care about the environment, care about their neighbor, care about, you know, nature, unless that idea is restored, that actually God created man in his image, nature belongs to God, and humanity was placed here as stewards to take care of it. Otherwise, it's just survival of the fittest. I don't care about you. Let the strongest survive. And if you're suffering, tough luck. I'm good. You know, how do you get that kind of heart change where people genuinely care unless you have some sort of moral imperative, moral reason that unites us as a human family? Because lions aren't fussed with what we're fussing about.
Exactly. It's the moral burden that makes us fussed even about these things, you know, and that's the burden that's been placed on man, you know, as a creature made in the image of God, that he does carry a moral burden too. He is his brother's keeper, you know. He does have to care about the ones next to him, you know.
And the environment.
You know, the responsibility, you know. And so there's things that can't be controlled, there's things that can, you know. How are we living now, you know? And those are questions that should be posed to anyone that is choosing to try and make a difference, you know.
Right.
And you know, Christ, you know, the foxes have holes, the birds have nests, Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. You know, he exemplified his that way of living. You know,
you only need one house.
Yes. Yeah.
Why do you need 10, 15? Like it's a real
thing. Yeah.
A real thing. And I think, you know, as we finish, you know, the changes that people desire, the kind of humanity people want to see, is impossible to achieve by government force. You know, the example has been demonstrated in the person of Jesus. You know, and how he was able to impact many people to be willing to give up their luxuries for the cause of other humanity. You know, raising up orphanages. You were talking about universities. You know, but living to give rather than take. And
we're the only creature with that moral burden.
Totally.
The lion eats the gazelle and lives his life, you know.
And he'll take the hyena's catch.
Yes, exactly, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, creatures will live by the survival of the fittest mentality. But when we're confronted with that within us, it's like, no, there's got to be something. There's something wrong with this picture, you know. If we are to live like that, you know. When the animal lives like that, it's like, okay, he's being a lion, you know. But we have that moral imperative, that moral burden, and that only comes from being connected to a source of morality, the God, you know. Otherwise, it's just nature, and then there's no. And if it's just nature, that moral imperative goes.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
Very good. Point made. Thanks, man. Good chat.